Hello, welcome back to RetroBreak and welcome to my video on the Birmingham gaming market. Here's the game that was in the thumbnail. This is Earthbound Uncut, which is actually a homebrew ROM hack, and this one here, Ancient Stone Tablets as well. Let me know in the comments whether you've ever played either of those before. It was really interesting to see things like this at the show. And here's a few other rare games that I found which I'll show off right now at the start of the video before we get on to a full tour of the show itself, which was by far my favourite game shopping experience of the year. There is so much really cool stuff to look at in this video, so let's get started with the first table here and some really rare special editions. Starting off with this brand new and sealed Cotton 2 and Guardian Force special edition for the Switch, which was really cool to see. They also had this Mario All-Stars video, which I do actually own, and it's a really weird video which features Craig Charles for some reason. I'll always remember that video from my childhood. There was also some really interesting Japanese gaming books here. Looks like some books about shooting games, so if anyone knows what those are like inside, let me know in the comments below, because I was kind of tempted to get them. This was also really interesting to see. This was a special edition of Poochie Carrot, which is actually one of my favourite puzzle games for the system, but it looks like it has some sort of special controller inside, which you could only get as part of a bundle with the game. £85 seems kind of reasonable as well for something so old and so interesting. And now for a look at the table right next to it. There's some really nice PC Engine and Super Famicom games there. Let me know in the comments below if anything catches your eye. There was definitely some stuff I would have loved to pick up if I had more spending money. At most of these stores as well, they also had boxes under the table full of a few games for systems that aren't quite as popular, like for example the Atari 2600 or the Intellivision, things like that really. So it's always really interesting to have a look underneath the table as well if you've got the chance. And now, let's take a quick flick through some of these Japanese PS2 games here. I was actually really impressed with the variety of games that they had on display. They were all really interesting games, and honestly, if I had the money, I would have grabbed a handful of them from here. And now that I've actually got a modded PS2, I can play these Japanese games. So let me know down in the comments below what Japanese exclusive PS2 games you would recommend that I try and pick up in the future. I would love to one day collect all of the Thunder Force games, because the first few games in the series are definitely some of my favourite shooters of all time, but I've never played 5 or 6 before. They also had a row of Japanese Mega Drive games too, and it's not really that often that you see Japanese Mega Drive games, so this was really cool to see. And there was also a load more boxed Super Famicom games, all for really reasonable prices too. There's the SNES version of Raiden, which apparently isn't as good as the PC Engine or the Mega Drive version. There's another game that I've always wanted to check out, and I'm kind of regretting not picking that one up now. It was only 15 quid and it seems like such an interesting game too. And moving on from the Super Famicom, there was also a great selection of Japanese Dreamcast games and Sega Saturn games up here as well. I didn't spend too long looking through them at this show, but I do really want to try and collect more games for both of those systems. I've got ways of playing Japanese games for all of the Sega consoles as well now, so let me know down below if there's any good Japanese exclusives for the Dreamcast or the Saturn as well. I would love to add some to my list. It also looks like they had a few homebrew and really interesting late releases for the Dreamcast there too. And now for a look at a system that I know nothing about at all. This is the Neo Geo CD. There's a lot of great games for the Neo Geo that I've heard about, but it's a system that I really haven't played much of and I would love to get one day. And now a look at some Japanese GameCube games. I just love the covers for the Japanese GameCube games. There was a game there that I wanted for the GameCube. Maybe next time, if this stalls at the next market, I might get this one because I've got all of the other Star Soldier games, so it would be great to be able to finish my collection by picking up the last one that I need. There was also a few Famicom Disk System games there as well, and although I do have a way of playing these, unfortunately because I've got the Sharp Famicom Twin, the belt that actually runs the Famicom Disk games is broken and I do need to get it fixed. But I am looking to get an original Famicom very soon as well, so I might end up getting the disk drive add-on for that instead. And here's a look at some of the cartridge games for the Famicom as well. There were so many great games here. Unfortunately, the prices were a little bit on the expensive side, especially compared to what I've seen them go for in Japan, but you pay for the privilege of being able to flick through them here in the UK, so you can't really complain too much. And the last thing we're going to be taking a look at on this stall is some of the PC Engine games here. And the PC Engine is one of my favourite consoles of that generation. There's just so many really interesting games that never saw the light of day outside of Japan. I would love to do some really in-depth videos on that system in the future. And I do actually have most of the good games for that system by now as well. Now, going from some really cool and rare games to a box of junk under the table, here's a look at what I call the Player 2 controllers. There wasn't really anything too exciting in here, but it is always fun just to rummage through these boxes and to see whether anything catches your eye. You might end up getting lucky and find something really interesting down there. And now for a look at some of the boxed items on the shelf here in the corner of the room. There was some actually really interesting stuff here. I just noticed as I was watching the video back, there was a complete in-box original Famicom for 70 quid. If I'd have seen that while I was taking this video, I probably would have bought that, so I'm kind of kicking myself now watching this back. There's also some other really cool box stuff. There was a Mega Drive 32X in the corner there, which is something that I would love to try and get a hold of in the future. And if you're into Master System games, this stall definitely had you covered. There's loads of Master System games here, all in really good condition and really reasonable prices as well. 35 quid for R-Type on the Master System, which is a fantastic port by the way. That's a really good price for that, and it's a really great game too. There was some Dreamcast games up there as well, as you can see, and some PlayStation 1 games. Let me know down in the comments below if you spot anything interesting. It's getting kind of difficult for me to buy Dreamcast games now because I think I have all of the good games that ever came out in the UK, and these days I just see a lot of the same game over and over again at these kind of shows, for the Dreamcast in particular. Now on this next stall over here, we have a box of really cheap cartridges here, which is fantastic if you're just getting into a system and you don't really care that much about whether it's complete in box or not. There's also some really reasonably priced Game Boy, Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance systems up there as well. Loads of really nice colours for the different systems too. It's always so fun to see all of the different colours that they released for those systems. And now for some more Master System games, although maybe more interestingly there was actually a boxed Super Game Boy right there on the right that unfortunately I didn't actually manage to get on camera. And now we're taking a flick through some GameCube games, actually pretty good prices here. Warrior Within for 6 quid, Pokemon Colosseum for only 40 as well. That's actually a really good price for that game. I saw it for a lot more than that at this show. And to go along with the Master System games, they also had some boxed Mega Drive games there as well. Again, all really good prices. And here we have a box of NES games. I was looking for NES games in particular, so I was really happy to have a flick through here. And I believe I actually picked up a few from this box, which I will actually be showing off in a future pickups video. So definitely subscribe if you want to see what NES games I picked up from the show, because I got some really cool stuff from this event. There was also a load of really nice complete in-box Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games here as well. And apart from the Pokemon games being crazy expensive, the prices for most of the other games in this box were actually fairly reasonable. And now here's a mix of some Mega Drive and some Master System games. Even though I've pretty much already got most of the Mega Drive games that I want at this point, I'm always really drawn in by the collections for the system, like the Mega Games collections and like Sonic compilation as well. They also had Comic Zone in here for 20 quid, which is a fantastic price for that game. I actually saw it later on at this show for going for about 60, so I did actually pick that one up. There's a spoiler for my pickups video. And on this table here they had some great GBA and original Game Boy games there, as well as a few Pokemon Stadium games too, including complete in box with the transfer pack, which is always really cool to see. And again, a load of Dreamcast games there, but nothing too exciting. Nothing really stood out to me there. And there was some 3DS games there on the side as well. And now this stall was pretty cool. It had a load of really nice toys and a few interesting DS games at the back there. Sonic All-Stars Racing for the DS is kind of interesting. It's not really a great version, but it's interesting that it exists in the first place. And now for some more NES games, and I did actually pick a few up from this box while I was there. And looking back over the video now, there's a few more that I wish I'd got to. Mac Rider was one that I got, and I actually regret getting that one because the game turned out to be kind of rubbish. And when I was on the stream playing that game, I was really having a hard time with it. I really don't understand why it's got any sort of fan base at all, that game. I really couldn't get anywhere in it at all. And at the back of the stall here, there was some of the more interesting and rare games. And likewise, on the other side, right there on the left as well, there was also some really cool PS1 games too. Now for a quick look inside this box here at some of the Wii and GameCube games. And here's one of the interesting games I wanted for the PS1. Let me know whether you've ever played this one before. And now for a stall that is always one of my favourites to see. This one shows off some really nice screens for a variety of different handhelds, and they also had built-in USB-C rechargeable batteries too. If I had the money, I would have loved to pick one of these up. They just look incredible. Now these next few stalls were actually a bit further down the hall in a different room entirely, and there's some really cool stuff here. There's a great set of Mega Drive games there, and my friend who was with me at the show actually bought a few games for the Mega Drive himself while he was here. And here's another box of NES games. I kind of regret not picking up that Probotector there, but for some reason the NES games in this box didn't have any prices on, and it was quite busy, so I didn't really have the chance to ask how much it was. And it does seem like this was one of the more expensive stalls there, having a look at some of those GBA and Game Boy Color games. It's just crazy to me that really common games like Metroid and Pokemon are now going for over £100, and Fire Emblem there for £200. That's just insane. I remember back in the day when you could easily get those games for like 20 or 30 quid, no problem. They also had a few big box PC games there though, which is pretty cool to see, and some really rare Mega Drive games in this box here. Maze & Wars is one that I've always been looking for, but it was a little bit out of my price range for the time being. Something else really cool that I saw a lot of at the show was actually the accessories for the N64. You can see there that they've got the memory card and the expansion pack complete in box, and I've never actually seen the boxes for those before, so that was actually really cool to see. I also loved this stall in the corner here. They had loads of amazing old magazines, and I actually picked up a handful, which I'll be showing off in my pickups video, so subscribe if you want to see what magazines I picked up from that stall. And here's something that I found interesting in the stall next to it. This is the special edition of Double Dash, and I think this might be the one that came with the second disc, which also included the Zelda Collector's Edition. I'm not entirely sure though, because I've never actually owned that specific version there. So if anyone knows, let me know down in the comments below. There was also some really nice DS games there as well. And at the back of the stall as well, unfortunately I didn't get much footage, but there was a box full of Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games there too. And here's another one of those N64 accessory boxes, this time for the Rumble Pack. I would have actually loved to get all of them complete in box because it's so cool to see, and this was actually one of my favourite stalls at the entire event. This is one of my favourite game shops, Vintage Gamer, and they brought all of their best stuff with them, and it was just a blast to have a look through all the incredible things that they had there. I did actually pick up something really interesting and obscure, and I can't wait to try it out, although I need to find my original PS1 with the expansion slot in the back, and maybe that was a little hint as well, so if you think you know what I picked up based on that kind of vague description, then let me know down in the comments below. They also had this box here full of Game Gear games. I didn't pick any up, but it was really cool to see, and if I do ever go and visit their shop again in the near future, I'll definitely be having a look through their Game Gear games, because I did get the Game Gear adapter for the Analog Pocket, and I am looking to get more Game Gear games to add to my collection. They also had some 32X games here as well, and the 32X is a system that I've wanted for a long time. Like I said earlier, I saw that one complete in box, so I could have got that and a good selection of games here to go along with it. Maybe next year. There wasn't really anything super interesting in any of these boxes, although I guess it was kind of cool to see the original Sonic & Knuckles in the cardboard box in fairly good condition too. And back by the Game Gear games, they also had a box here full of loose SNES games as well. There wasn't actually anything that I didn't already own or that I didn't really want, unfortunately, but it did seem like there was some really cool games in here. So if you didn't have games like Plock or Super R-Type or Mario All-Stars, then there was definitely a lot of really cool stuff to pick up there. And there was also this box here full of NES games. Again though, there wasn't anything super exciting for me, so I didn't end up picking up anything from this one, but there was a lot of classics in there. So if you're ever after a good set of games to build up a collection and you don't have some of the more common titles, then definitely check out Vintage Gamer, either at any of these events or go and check out their shop in Birmingham, because it is amazing, and I really need to go back and do another tour of it at some point. They also had a great selection of Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games here. Bubble Ghost is one of my favourite games for the DMG, and I also love all of those NES classic games that they had at the back there. I also used to love the Breath of Fire game too, so it's really cool to see that one. And from that stall we went back into another one of the side rooms, and this one had loads of really cool big box PC games on the shelf there, and then there was a bunch of random PC games and shovelware, DS and PS1 titles here. It was kind of fun just to have a look through these and laugh at all all of the terrible games. They did actually have a great selection of Japanese PS2 games though there, which was really cool to see. And then they had this huge wall of PS2 games, which were just mostly shovelware again, but it was kind of overwhelming just to see that many games in one place. This was something cool as well. I loved those artwork pieces at the back there, and they had a few interesting games on display too. And now back into the main room. We're going across the back of the room now, and this is where I found that Earthbound Uncut that I picked out at the start of the video, but they had loads of other really interesting things on this stall as well. There's my friend there showing off Micro Machines for the Mega Drive, a fantastic game, and that's a really interesting game for the Mega Drive because it actually has controller ports in the controller for multiplayer, which is really cool. Another really interesting stall here. The thing that caught my eye on this one was the Rodea, the Sky Soldier, and Ribbit King up there for the GameCube as well. In fact, there was a load of great GameCube games up there, so go back and pause the video on that frame and take a look at some of those games. There's also a few of the lesser rare games there in the box, and there's also a great selection here of Game Gear games. There's Master of Darkness, which I pulled out in the intro to this video. One of my favourite games on the Master System, but I've never actually played the Game Gear version before, so I wonder if there's any difference between the two. They also had some Japanese GameCube games here. Homeland is one that I've actually always wanted for the system. I also just love how the Japanese GameCube games looks in these really nice cute little boxes. There was also Gift Pier there as well, and if I didn't already have that game, that would have been very exciting to see. And it's also really sad that the Japanese version of Chibi Robo is so much cheaper than what it is here in the UK. Here's a few consoles here. There was another Famicom there as well, and I was kind of tempted to go back and get that one at the end of the show, but for whatever reason I didn't go back there, so unfortunately I didn't walk away with the Famicom. And here's another one of my favourite stalls at the show. This is Alan's Retro Games. I believe it's called Forbidden Worlds is the name of his shop, and there's always so much really cool stuff here, and it's so fun to just flick through all of the Japanese games, and the fact that I can actually play pretty much all of the Japanese games that he has on his stall now is really exciting, and I can easily spend hours and hours just flicking through everything here. There's the Japanese version of Lilac Wars for the N64 there, or Star Fox 64, as it's known outside of the UK. There was just so much really great stuff, and there was loads of really nice boxed systems and accessories at the back there as well. Now on this next stall here, another set of really expensive Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, really on the high prices I think on this stall. Earthworm Jim for 80 quid, I'm sure that game isn't worth anywhere near that price. Also, Metroid Zero Mission for 135, that's pretty insane, and Wario Land 2 for 90. These prices are just crazy. I really hope no one paid that much for the games. Or maybe they are actually worth that much these days, and I'm just kind of out of touch with how much more expensive Game Boy and Game Boy Color games have got over the past few years, because that's crazy. Kuru Kuru Kuruin, that game used to be a $5 back in the day. Now for some more rare games, here's Castlevania Legacy of Darkness for the N64, a game that I've always wanted because I do actually quite enjoy the original Castlevania for the 64. There was also Top Gear Rally 2 there as well, I love those racing games, and a really interesting one, Duke Nukem 3D for the Sega Mega Drive, which apparently came out in around 1998. For the original Mega Drive and only in Brazil, and the even weirder thing about it is that it is an actual licensed Duke Nukem game by 3D Realms, and it's so interesting. I did a bit of research online after, and it actually looks surprisingly good too. Now in this stall I found a few more NES games to add to my collection. I really regret not picking up Probotector 2 there. I would love to get those games. I've obviously played the Contra games, but I've never actually played or owned the Probotector versions. And if you don't know, it was changed to Probotector in the UK because of some weird laws that we had in the 80s, which needed to censor the humans being killed, so they swapped to robots basically. It's really strange, but I would love to get those games for my collection at some point. And here's a quick look at some PS1 games there, and here's a look at a few games on the top of this shelf here. Let me know if you spot anything interesting. I'm always drawn to Kudelka for the PS1. It's a game that I picked up for just a few p back in the day, but it's getting fairly pricey now, and it's also really interesting in that it's one of the only games I know that's actually set in Wales. And I also found another bunch of loose NES games here, and I did actually pick a few up from this stall as well. As you can see there, I grabbed Punch Out, and I think the other one I got from here is Golf. Yeah, there we go, Golf for 5 quid. which is pretty good. It's one of the very early black box games for the NES, which means they're one of the simplest games for the system, but it's just interesting to see where the system got its start and how much it changed over the years that it was on sale. I'm going to go into more detail about the history and the development of the NES soon as well, so if you think that sounds like something you'd be interested in watching, please subscribe, because I am putting a lot of effort into making sure that I'm researching everything right for it, and I really hope it does really well too, because it's something I'm very passionate about. Here's another rare game I found, and when I first picked this one up I actually looked at the screenshots on the back and thought, hey, that looks pretty cool, maybe I'll pick it up, and then I turned it round and saw the price on the front and just noped that one away. But let me know if you've ever heard of it before, because it did look really cool. And of course, you're probably sick of these now, but here's another box full of NES games. There was a few really interesting games in here as well, and a few of my favourites too. Kabuki Quantum Fighter is one of my all-time favourite NES games. I actually showed that one off in my top 15 NES games video, so go ahead and watch that one if you haven't seen that yet to find out what some of my other picks are. They also had the original Pac-Man there on the NES, and a few of the really interesting Codemasters games at the back there, which were kind of unlicensed NES games where you'd have to put an official game in the front of it and then sort of stick it out the system, and it's a really weird way of getting around the copy protection, but it does work, and it's really interesting, and maybe it's something I'll do a video on in the future. Now, the thing that stood out to me on this stall was the really nice boxed systems at the back there. I love the original packaging for the SNES, the N64 and the NES there as well. It brings back some really nice nostalgic memories. And here's a look at the other side of the stall with even more boxed systems. They really did have a fantastic selection there. I especially love the Mega Drive one with Sonic on the front. And on this stall there was a few unboxed systems too. They had the original style Master System, which I would love to get one day because I think it looks way better than the Master System 2. And then on this stall here, here's a look at some of the rarer games that they've got at the back there. This stall's always at these shows, so I've pretty much seen all these games 100 times before, but it's still really cool to see them every time I go back to one of these shows. This market in particular seemed like a great place to buy boxed systems, so if you're ever on the lookout, definitely come to the Birmingham market for them. They also had a load of games on the table laying flat, so it was great to look through these. I did actually pick up a game from this stall as well. A few games that caught my eye on here. Theme Park World was one of my favourite games on the PS1 back in the day. I really loved the fact that you could actually walk around your park in that one. And now to round this video off, here's a look at some PC games. I don't really know anything about the old PC games for things like the Commodore, the Amiga, the Spectrum. Here's the Commodore 64 version of Contra. Really interesting to see that, I'd never seen that before. And here's another look at some games for those sort of systems too. Again, I don't really know anything about them, and it's kind of hard to get into that sort of thing without having a good way of either storing the systems or actually getting them hooked up in the first place. Maybe in the future, now that I've got my own house, I'm going to convert the garage and potentially have a few old PCs in there. So maybe in the future you can expect some retro PC stuff too, but that won't come for quite a while yet. There was also a great set of rare games on here as well. As Your Dreams for the PS1 there, that's a game that I've wanted for a long time. There was a great variety of loose systems on this stall as well, from a range of different Atari consoles to the Amiga CD32, which is something else that I don't really know that much about as well. And of course, it wouldn't be one of these videos without taking a look at a few loose Game Boy games. And there we go, that brings us to the end of the Birmingham gaming market. Let me know down in the comments if you're still watching at this point, and thank you so much to my Patreons. I've got 3 new supporters, so I want to say a huge thank you in particular to Thomas Schnauzer, John Rue and Creepy Parsnip. If you enjoyed this, check out the video on the left and go and watch that one next. Goodbye!